All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm here to respond to the government's bill, the broad bill that they have just tabled in the House of Commons. First off, if you look at the bill itself, there should be alarming to many Canadians. The bill is 126 pages long. I've not had a chance to review the bill in its entirety, but looking at it, particularly with respect to the immigration provisions, is very concerning to me that the government will now be breaching, I think, people's civil liberties, I think violating people's due process, and taking away people's basic rights. Right now, what we're looking at is the government giving authority, broad sweeping authority within government to cancel applications, to withdraw applications, to suspend applications, even those that are already in the inventory that is under process. They can just decide right now that they're going to pull an application, as an example. The other thing that the bill would enable is for people's private information to be shared. And much of this information, by the way, or much of this authority is not prescribed in the legislation, but rather it will come out later on by regulation. So that is to say, we actually don't even know how it is going to work. I am very concerned that people's privacy would be breached. I'm very concerned that those who submitted claims in the immigration system will all of a sudden find their application being withdrawn. And so these are some of the measures that the government is bringing forward with this bill. The other thing that we should take note, of course, is that I'm not sure what the appeal process is, if there is even an appeal process related to these sweeping immigration measures. And part of the due process is, in fact, making sure that there's an independent process, a clear process that people can follow, and an appeal process for rejection of applications. And it doesn't seem to me that there's a clear process for appeal in the legislation.
Specifically about the asylum claims changes, where I believe they're saying that you'd have to be in Canada for a year to then claim asylum. What do you make of that? Is that an arbitrary number in your case? Do you think that's fair?
That's another limitation that the government has brought forward, and those who's come to Canada, if you're going to seek an asylum claim, if you don't do it within a year under this bill, you will lose your right to make an asylum claim. Now, in talking with a lot of people who's fled persecution, who are here in Canada, it takes them some time to orient their situation, to find representation, and then to make a claim. And now, I'm not a refugee, so I haven't actually experienced that. I don't know the trauma that people have experienced to get to where they are, to safety here in Canada. To put that kind of limitation is particularly worrying for, I think, refugee claimants, people who are faced with persecution. I think is an arbitrary date, that the timeline that the government has just decided to put in place. And so that's another component that I would say falls under the rubric of lack of due process.
The government is closing the 14-day loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. And do you think that you're confident the government will show enough compassion to the people who won't be able to file claims anymore? Or is there a humanitarian risk there?
Well, they are putting in all kinds of limitations, really trying to effectively prevent people from accessing asylum claims here in Canada, whether it be the 1-year limitation or the 14-day requirement with the Safe Third Country Agreement. The truth of the matter is, from my perspective, the Safe Third Country Agreement already violates many of the people who face persecution, their rights to seek asylum. That is already happening right now. And to put further limitations on it will further erode their right. Look at what's going on in the United States right now. In the United States, you have President Trump actually outright targeting people from the LGBTQ2+ community, people whose gender identity is being denied. And so in the face of all of that, the government is now saying, by the way, if you're fleeing persecution in the United States, we're closing the door on you. And by the way, after 14 days, if you even somehow manage to get to Canada in safety, after 14 days, you will lose your right to seek asylum here in Canada. Canada may as well just say to the international community, we no longer support asylum seekers. They may as well just be honest about that.
The minister says that he believes he struck the balance between protecting civil rights and giving more powers, or enough power to law enforcement. Do you think he struck that balance?
Short answer is no. I know this is what the minister says, and that's what he believes. But in reality, if you look at the bill, you are the government, the minister is creating a situation where your personal information could be disclosed without your consent. Right? The government is putting in barriers for people to access Canada's immigration system to get to safety, for asylum claimants to get to safety. They're putting down barriers with respect to that. Can you imagine in a situation where if you, in good faith, follow the steps, follow the procedures, follow the rules that the government has set out and submitted your application, then out of the blue, after this bill passes, the government can then just decide, I'm sorry, I'm just going to withdraw your application. I'm going to suspend your application. I'm just going to deny your application. Is that striking a fair balance of civil liberties? I think not.
What do you make of the omnibus aspect of it? There's quite a bit included in this bill. Is that problematic too? I know like the Stephen Harper government used to do that quite a bit. Can you speak to that? And also, can you speak to the new powers to law enforcement, aside from the immigration aspect, what concerns you have with the other stuff?
Yeah, the Liberals, of course, promised that they would not bring in omnibus bills. And so in this Parliament, the first bill really effectively that they brought in is an omnibus bill. It's a bill that is broad, it's 126 pages long. It touches on a whole variety of different areas, from law enforcement to immigration to even the Ocean Act, if you will. So there's a broad range of areas to which this bill encapsulates. I have not had a chance to look at all the components in detail, but one thing, what is telling me is this: a lot of this work, it seems to me, is kind of for show for the, I should reframe that. I think that the title of the act is for show for the Trump administration. They are trying to create this illusion that Canada's border is more secure in some way. But however, a lot of the components within the bill targets Canada's own immigration policies and processes. That has nothing to do with the United States, as an example. If the government really want to make sure that we crack down on safety for Canadians, on preventing firearms, illegal firearms in crossing the border, as an example, or drugs crossing the border, then they should actually put back, for example, the port police. The Conservatives canceled the port police. I know this because it's right in my riding in Vancouver East, right in the port there. They canceled the port police. The Liberals has had 10 years to restore the port police. Did they do it? No. And then the communities are impacted directly right on the ground with such measures. So if they really want to address the crime and safety question, which is paramount in the hearts and minds of many Canadians, then the first thing they should be doing is actually introducing a bill and bringing back the port police.
Last question. Do you think this is going to lead to more people living underground? People who've had their visa applications cancelled, people not able to seek asylum. Does that concern you, that you may end up with more people living undocumented?
The reality is such that the Liberals and the Conservative both want to blame their failed government policies on new immigrants, on people who's come to Canada to support Canada's economy, who's come to Canada, and we sought after them to come to Canada to study here in Canada. And all of a sudden, the government decides that because of the housing crisis, the most convenient thing for them to do is to blame the newcomers. And so these measures are absolutely, I think, are going to push people underground, further underground. Already we have a situation where people are fearing for their lives. I think that there are already people who fear persecution and feel that they can no longer be protected here in Canada and seek that process. And so if we really want to address these issues in a fair way, New Democrats actually during the campaign suggested this and call for the government to bring forward a blue ribbon panel. What we need to do is to bring forward people in the community who are experts in the field, the nonprofit sector who's been working with the immigrant and refugee community, and people who have this knowledge base, and the provinces and the territories and local governments to come forward so that we can sit down to examine what is the path forward for Canada's immigration policy. What should the immigration levels numbers look like? We should actually have a blue ribbon panel on this and fully examine this issue and come forward with a process that is fair and a process that will support Canada's future. The other thing that I think is critically important, especially in the face of a bill like this, is that we need an immigration ombudsperson. The Democrats have been calling for this for years now. I tabled a private member's bill last year to say that we need to have a immigration ombudsperson. More than ever, we need someone who's going to be a watchdog for the action of this government.
Is NDP support in the throne speech contingent on a spring budget or economic update being tabled?
Well, our caucus will continue to have that discussion, and we'll have more to say about that.
You brought up the Trump issue. And seems the subtext of this entire legislation is to appease Trump and get the tariffs off. Do you think it's going to work?
Well, if people actually looked at the legislation itself, there are lots of pieces that I think should be concerning to Canadians. As I've mentioned, if you look at the immigration piece that has been put in place, it is internal to Canada's immigration processes, has nothing to do with the United States. And so is it going to work? I mean, the United States with the Trump administration in its best is erratic. And in its best, the Trump administration will just one day levy tariffs against Canada for no particular reason. And they would even do it in violation of the law, right? And as we've seen from the court decisions. And that is the reality that we're faced with. What we saw, of course, was the Prime Minister during the campaign who said that he's going to demand respect from President Trump. But what we didn't know, of course, is that we have already capitulated with respect to some of the tariff measures. And so what I'm looking for, and I think what Canadians are looking for, is for the Prime Minister to really stand behind his words that he is going to be there to protect Canada's sovereignty. Look at the situation with the Golden Dome as an example. You have the Prime Minister saying that he's considering that. How is that protecting Canada's sovereignty? So to me, we need to actually match action with words. And Canadians want all members of Parliament to stand together to protect Canada's sovereignty, to fight for Canada, and to say no to Trump. And so, putting forward a bill such as this, I don't know if it's going to work or not. Trump is unpredictable. But what they have got to do is to make sure that the bill itself is best in Canadians, in Canada's best interest. And right now, I'm not sure if they've achieved that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Has he listened to anything? Of course not. He'll do it his way. We've seen what he's done over the last 3 months.
Is it overreach?
On his part?
On Canada's part.
Oh no, not at all. I think we've done the right things.
And do you think will the Conservatives support this?
Just wait and see. Will it surprise you?
How do you feel about the government not meeting with the First Nations at the start of the process for a big project of national interest?
Well, I would say that's inaccurate.
Can you elaborate?
We have a First Nations premier who's at the table every time. We have an Inuit premier. I think that all of the discussion points from the big projects that we're looking at are prioritizing projects that have buy-in from the Indigenous communities already.
And I take your point, but I raise you the Assembly of First Nations and other groups who were not at the table and who are going to meet with Minister Carney in July, apparently.
And I think it's, when we're looking at the big projects, it's important that the rights holders, if impacted, are at those tables in a proactive way ahead of time. But my understanding is the initial conversations have all been around those projects that have buy-in from Indigenous communities will be the ones prioritized.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we know the Ring of Fire is one thing that was talked about yesterday. We don't know if it's on this list of potential fast tracks. There is some Indigenous community opposition to the Ring of Fire or concern around that project. So is there worry on your end that we could see court challenges on these projects that people are trying to fast track?
You know, I don't want to speculate about which projects and where they're going to happen. What I do know from what the conversations have been to this point is that the projects that can demonstrate that Indigenous people have bought into it and are in approval of these projects are the ones that are going to be prioritized. That's been in the communications from the Prime Minister's office, and I think it's been clear that the projects that have Indigenous participation and involvement are the ones that are going to get prioritized. And I look forward to seeing that list. But you know, as Indigenous caucus members, we have met, we're discussing, we're giving examples to government on how we can be proactive, engaging in consultations. But it's going to be up to those provinces that are collaborating on big projects to demonstrate to us as a federal government that there is Indigenous buy-in, because we don't want to end up in court with challenges because of things that where there's not buy-in already.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you for stopping.